Hello and welcome. My name is Matt Workman. Let's check out how the virtual camera works. I'm doing this in my house.
How the do you do everything you do?
This is Matt Workman. He's a cinematographer and virtual production pioneer. He's known for his viral videos showcasing Unreal Engine, metahumans, motion capture, and cutting-edge virtual production tools. He's also the creator of innovative softwares that empower filmmakers to plan and visualize scenes with ease.
What was it transition like going from cinematographer, DP, to going into becoming essentially a game dev?
There's a lot of people who do that in the film industry. They work on set and they develop software for it and tools.
You've developed Cinetracer on your own. What was the biggest challenge making it?
How does this work? I do like nothing. Let me tell you, back then, there were no YouTubers teaching us. None. There was nobody. I can talk about a failure.
Yeah, let's go.
I tried to rebuild Cinetracer 2. I put it out there, and that was received horribly. Really bad.
Oh, man. The most valuable people in this space are the ones that can inspire us. They're the ones that can show us what we can do. You have inspired thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of artists around the world. But the real question is, what inspired you in the first place? Matt, welcome to the Bad Decisions podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to meet. In person, we went over this. In person, virtual, it's good to meet.
Virtual, in person, this is how we're doing it. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. At least we're finally meeting because it's been such a long time. We wanted to speak with you, and we've been a long-time fan of the content that you produce. So it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Matt, listen, one thing that me and Farhad have talked about prior to this episode, we were discussing the fact that the most valuable people in this space, in the creative space, are the ones that can inspire us, are the ones that can show us what is possible. They're the ones that can show us what we can do, things that we didn't know we were capable of. And the funny thing is that is precisely how we found you. You have inspired thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of artists around the world just by the experiments that you've done on the YouTube channel, just by showing us, precisely talking about our metahuman content that we were watching, the motion capture videos that you created with metahumans, with the lightsabers, with the cloth simulations, with the chairs, with the pitch perfect motion capture, with your Vicon system, things that we didn't know were possible with metahumans. You showed us that way, and it inspired us to go and learn more about metahumans, to create content about metahumans, and I cannot even imagine how many more artists. And that is, I think, why you are one of the most valuable members of this community, and you've inspired many people. But the real question is, what inspired you in the first place?
Well, specifically talking about like metahumans and motion capture, I think when I was younger, I really wanted to make game cinematics. I still do. Played, pretty sure I'm thinking like StarCraft 1, like intro cinematic. There's like a Zergling and a truck hits it. I think they're in the desert. World of Warcraft cinematics with the mage. Like I know the shots. And, it's kind of just been like a journey trying to get to there. It did start off in live action production because back then computers were back when I was in elementary school, middle school, computers were pretty slow. Doing 3D was pretty painful. It's not like UE5 real time now. Now it's it's pretty fun. But it was actually game cinematics and movies in general. I just wanted to make, that type of image.
Did you study for that? So when you had that passion when you were young, did you go to college or uni for cinema or for 3D?
I ended up going to school for computer science because that's what I thought made sense.
Hey, high five. I did that too.
Did it work? Yeah, it's I don't, there was no, or if there was game industry or movie industry where I was growing up in Boston, I wasn't aware of it. I don't think the internet was as pervasive. If your channel existed back then, I might have been able to get a better approach to it. But I went to school for computer science. I was like, that's how you make games. And, but then I ended up transitioning into filmmaking kind of for similar reasons that I said. It's just 3D back then is really slow. I was like, this doesn't look like what I want to make. It's there's the Blizzard cinematics and here's what I'm making. And I was like, these are not the same things. So filmmaking, just live action filmmaking, I was just so much more immediate. And I ended up interning in New York City at Curious Pictures, which I think is possibly gone now. They're an animation studio. And I was lucky enough they had a mocap stage. They had like
Wow.
motion capture, stop motion cameras, and just doing animation for like Barbie and stuff like that. So moved to New York, got into like kind of live action VFX, and then eventually moved to New York City and just worked in the film industry.
What was your role when you were working in the movie industry?
So I started off as like a gaffer and a camera assistant, so working like crew, and then eventually just started being a cinematographer, director of photography. And at the time, it was a DVX 100A, if anyone knows that camera. I bought one of those. It was very expensive at the time. I just started freelancing. So I was like Craigslist, Mandy.com. I was on that like all day. And this came out this is like right as the first iPhone came out. And so I was like, I felt like I was like the king of like Craigslist Mandy in New York City, which is like job listings, like literal, just like little web forms, respond to all of them. And I would just shoot all the music videos and all the little short films, like most were free, some paid a little bit. But then eventually I met, people through that. And some of those people went on to go work at like really big companies and do, bigger things. And I kind of came with them.
Wait, so you would go on Craigslist and then you would be the one posting your services and then people would find you?
No,
you would find people that had requests
Job
and then you would
posts.
go and do... Okay, job posts.
Yep.
And then what were you doing specifically? Were you just shooting the videos? Were you editing them? Were you just what were you doing exactly in all of those jobs?
Mostly filming and lighting. So like what the cinematographer does. So I brought the camera. I owned like a ton of lights over time. And I would just shoot everything. One, to learn. Two, to network. And just build a reel. And there were some where I would like edit them too. But New York City was like popping enough that it's like, no, it's like there are directors, there are DPs, there's like a difference. Now I'm not sure like how that market would look now. I feel like there's a lot more like I as the video provider deliver the entire project, perhaps. But back then it was like traditionally like just the camera and lighting.
And how hard were you grinding at the time?
As much as I could, as much as it's freelance, so it's like you don't really control like YouTube. You can just like make a million videos if you wanted to. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
So I was definitely like responding to every post. It was like I was just like all day on this iPhone version 1 on like Craigslist. I would just respond to all of them, and I would also go to like user forums back in the day, like DVX user, and I was just on the internet. So I suppose not that different than how I am now, but just like everything I could find, and it's still to this day, it's like I just would share everything. I think that was a big one. I was like Facebook, literally MySpace DPing away. But I would just like I do now, it's like, hey, I just shot this video, and we'd put it out there and people were like, that's cool. And it led to some pretty big opportunities. Got to shoot like a music video for like KRS-One. They flew me out to LA, and people were like, hey, I saw that music video you shot. It's like, you want to shoot one for us? And it just kept going. And this is like kind of early internet stuff. Now it's like obvious, but like back then it was pretty new.
Wait, that's an interesting point right there because, I don't know if you know Gary Vee, right? Post Gary Vee era, everybody started making content because then there's this guy shouting every single day on Instagram. You gotta
Whatever
make
you
content.
do, make video about it.
So I think I would like to give some credits to him for making most of the businesses in the world, small to medium-sized businesses, understand you need content for your business. But prior to him, it was more so a personality trait. Were you the kind of person who would like to share your work online? And it's funny that even at the MySpace era, you were sharing your work, even though at the time there was really no incentive to do so. I mean, now if you're sharing it, you're going to get money from YouTube, you're going to get money from sponsorship deals. Back then, there was really no incentive. So what was motivating you to take in all these jobs and then go back home, spend time to post about them, even though I don't know how many likes you got at the time. I'm
there
curious
likes?
to know how the post did well.
Was there
I don't know. I never used MySpace,
It wasn't
by the way.
until like Facebook there were likes, I think. I'm not even sure you could track it. It used to be like top friends. Well, I don't know why we're talking about MySpace, but it would literally be like, it's like, oh, if like one of the directors or like, someone like that put you as like their top friend, I was like, that's it, we made it. Like, so I don't think there was engagement like that back then, but it's like, it was sort of like straightforward because it was like a portfolio, right? So it's like, I always had like a website, like a traditional website, and it's like, that's what I've shot. If you would like them to look like that, that's what it is. So it was kind of just like a portfolio, but I've just always really liked filming behind the scenes, taking pictures, and just sharing that. And I still do, and that's what I still do. So it was no different back then. It was just like a real camera on set. Now it's much more virtual, but it's pretty much the same like I like making images, and I also like talking about them at the same time.
But that's a great trait. A lot of people are hesitant to put their content, their work behind the scene online. Even nowadays, which is much easier from your era and much easier to get jobs, a lot of people are hesitant. Was it difficult for you to post your work or post your project, even though you thought that they were not perfect or they were not good, or you were okay to put everything online?
I was pretty okay, probably just from ignorance. I think if I came from like
That's the best thing. That's a superpower, I think.
yeah, I think even now, like I look at what I've posted on, like I think like LinkedIn is kind of MySpace now. I'm not sure that that's really the equivalent, but it's sort of like MySpace for music videos, and music at the time was like serious. I was like, artists posted there, directors posted there. I'd post there. I look at some of the stuff I post on LinkedIn. It's very like sketchy, like sketch phase. I was like, "Is a concept?
Right, yeah.
I'm throwing it out there. Is this AAA quality? No, certainly not. Awful. Like, would this go to portfolio? It's like you're disqualified immediately." But I kind of just like have to these days. It's sort of my work. I was like, "Oh, I like tried this thing. I'll post it, even if it's like gray box and awful." It's like that's just how I kind of do it. Whereas I can certainly understand the approach of like, we're going to wait till it's finished and it's perfect and here's the perfect ArtStation post. I'm like, I don't think my stuff even makes it to that phase half the time. So I'm happy to do it, and it's worked out well for me so far, I think.
I love that. That mentality is so good. Of course, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But
I think it will help everybody if they do it.
again, I don't want to use the term everybody because, so many people might not even care. It's not even their goal to have any sort of attention on social media or get any jobs. They're just happy creating art for themselves. So for those people, I'm happy. That's not who I'm talking about. But there's a huge population that we get texts from on our Instagram on a daily where they're trying to get their renders in front of people, where they're trying to get their videos in front of other people. And the method that you've used, I think works perfectly, because then even if your work is not 100% done, you can still start sharing it online. Just a photo, just a comparison. And you never know whose eyes might be set on your post, because the algorithm works in wondrous ways. And sometimes the weirdest moments can happen where somebody you actually respect will see your work. They might share it.
And they might hire you. How many times people have reached out to us and said that, oh, I loved work with that guy. I made a fan art. They saw it. They hired me right after that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's how I got connected with Epic Games. I eventually from working on set as a DP, I started doing previs, technical previs. So I've been making 3D movie cranes and things like that for a long time. And, sharing it.
How did you do that?
No, I'm actually, for people who might not know what is previs, do you mind explaining what previs is? Yes.
Yeah. So from my context anyway, like as the cinematographer, we would need to like pitch and bid projects. It's like, hey, the director wants to like film this shot. There's two people. They're spinning in a circle. It turns blue. It turns orange. And it's like, what does that mean? Like literally, that's what the treatment says. So for me as a DP, I used to pre-visualize that or just visualize it. So I would get in like a 3D program like SketchUp, which is like used to be a free 3D program. It's not anymore, but was like kind of a Blender-y type free place. 3D program. And I would just be like, here's a cylinder, here's another cylinder, those are the two people, and then put a little camera there. And that's previs. And we would send those boards out with the pitch. Or once the job was, won, it would be like, okay, what are we really doing here? And like, before we're in person, it's like, here's some planning. It's like, did you want to look this way? Is it this wide shot? Is it a close up? So just kind of planning visually. You could 2D storyboard it, but I would do it in 3D. So that's how I used previs. As a DP, as a cinematographer.
Wow. And where did you learn 3D?
Just trying to be a 3D artist, but failing for many, many, many years. And then going into live action filmmaking. I think I started with Milkshape and Bryce.
Milkshape? What is Milkshape?
Milkshape is like a really old 3D modeling program. So you'd have to you've either heard of it or you haven't. But then there's
I've never heard of it. Holy shit. Okay.
It's not industry or anything like that, but it was like free, I think, a long time ago. And Bryce was like kind of like an environmental program. Poser, you just to move like 3D people around. So I've been doing that for a while. And then I eventually got in college during programming. I also took like a couple like Maya courses and learned Maya, which is a very like academic 3D program. Like they have free student licenses. I took a couple of courses. And like the big turning point for me was when I discovered a company called The Third Floor.
Right,
third
yes.
floor in Halon, like really big Previs companies, for movie companies. So like what I would do for like a little music video, they do for an entire movie, and they'll make the entire movie first in 3D and plan out a lot. And a lot of it's very technical. It's like, okay, so like the crane's this, like how high does that mean we have to build the set? So it's technical Previs. And once I discovered that through like behind the scenes reels or like VFX magazines, that sort of thing, I was like, whoa, like a 3D camera for planning? I was like, that's like kind of my jam. And that's still pretty much my jam. I was like, that is like, absolutely incredible. So I started to build like 3D cameras, like the actual 3D camera and the dolly and the crane they would go on. I just slowly learned how to do it. I remember being on the train and like on my janky PC laptop, like trying to 3D model like a dolly and like,
Oh no.
like that was the grind for a while. But making those, it's like it got a lot of, and I'm not sure a lot, but it actually got a lot of a surprising amount of industry attention. I was like, I'm just like building my little 3D cameras, like no big deal. But I made like a Maya plugin, which is like one of my first companies, and like real people started using it, and people still want it. I just don't make it anymore. Then I started building Cinema 40 products around this, like 3D cameras and cranes. That's still used by like a lot of people. It's not supported anymore. And then the way I got connected with Epic is someone from Epic Games saw this, and this is like right before, and they must have probably known that this was the direction. This is like right before like the word virtual production was a thing. Like no one.
Yeah.
I made videos about virtual production like 10 years ago using the word. And it was like,
shit.
and it was like,
shit.
Okay.
and it's like, what is this? Like, it's like no one really knew, but it was like, so like Epic kind of contacted me like right before they were like starting like the big virtual production journey, and asked me to build this kind of stuff in Unreal Engine. And that's literally how I got into Unreal Engine. I was building it on my own, and they were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you did this in a game engine? I was like, what's a game engine? Like, why would you do that? Which seems silly now, perhaps, to ask that. But at the time, it was like I had done like a little UDK3 at the time. But anyway, posting my little like 3D cranes and whatnot on the internet got me directly connected with Epic Games.
Wow. I love hearing that, and I love how it all turned out. And we're going to break it down because I want to know, when you were making the Maya plugin, the Cinema 40 plugin, this is when you were working at the third floor?
So I was never working there. I just respected their work a lot. I saw their behind the scene demos.
Right.
And that was the first time I saw like a 3D crane, like a nice accurate model of a crane being used for what is technical previs. So I was never working there. But as a DP, I did work with companies like The Mill and Frame Store. I'd be the DP. There'd be like a VFX supervisor there. And so there was a little bit at that time. We would like exchange Maya files and whatnot, which they use Linux and like really crazy versions of Maya. I'm on like a Mac and trying to, which is still technically, I guess, Unix. But I never worked there. But I did work alongside some big VFX companies, and we'd kind of like exchange notes, especially for like motion control shoots, where it's like the camera's on like a robot. That's all planned.
Yeah.
That's all planned. I was like, hey, send me the Maya file. They're like, you use Maya? I was like, really badly, but yes. Yeah.
Still do it.
Yeah.
So how many years did that go? I'm talking about before you joined forces with Epic Games to create what we're going to talk about, Cinetracer, and everything else you've done. How long was that period of time where you were just creating plugins, working as a cinematographer?
Yeah, so I think I graduated college 2007, I believe is the year. And it was about 10 years in New York City and traveling all around, did a lot in LA. And it was sort of towards like the last 3 years of that, I started to get more serious about like building like a product perhaps around the 3D previs. I was like, before it was just like an asset. I was like, when they're bidding me as a DP, my agent would bid me. It's like, Matt does like previs. He's going to previs like most of this shoot. Not everything, but a significant amount. So it was just like, at that time, I was like, oh, it's just like a feature that I have as I get hired. But then I was like, other people are asking, they're seeing this, they're like, we'd like to do this too. So it's like that last 3 years, like whatever those date ranges, I don't know. It was about 10 years as a DP. And then I feel like it's been the last, this is just addition. I should be able to figure it out on my resume, but it's like 6 or 7 years has been in Unreal Engine doing that. So those are roughly the numbers. Hopefully that doesn't make me like 70 years old, but I think that's the timeline, give or take a couple.
No one's calculating here. No one's calculating. Yeah, I promise.
Yeah.
But by the time that Epic contacted you, have you worked with Unreal Engine, or you were using only Maya and other 3D software? And when Epic reached out to you, that was the first time you started using Unreal.
Before that, I had done one FX PhD course on Previs using Unreal Engine, but it was Unreal Engine UDK 3. So it was real rough. It was real rough back then. It was cool, but I was like, hey, but like the Maya viewport's just as good. Why would I do this? So I took like one UDK 3 course, but then it was, I think Unreal Engine, it was about 4.17 or 18 when Epic reached out to me. And the main thing I was interested in at the time was like RTX, like real-time ray tracing, was just about to come out, and so that was part of the pitch. So they gave to me. They're like, "Hey, we're like working on this thing." It's like, because at the time I was looking at like Redshift and Octane and GPU rendering, and I had a pretty big user base of people that were using that things, but like those are expensive computers. Yeah, it was based in Cinema 4D, also really expensive, and it's like, yeah, if you want to do this in real time, just get like at the time just get 4 1080 Ti's, and I still have 2 of them. They're around here somewhere. I was like, it's like that's all you need. It's a lot.
That's all you need.
Yeah, no big deal. Like easy previs, but Unreal Engine came to him and they're like, one, it was like, we would like to, it'd be great if you did this kind of work in Unreal Engine. And 2, it's like, hey, we're coming out with this thing that's like real-time ray tracing, so it's going to like look good and be really fast. And I was like, cool. And the demos that I made back then, the absolutely cursed demos, some of them went really viral because they're just absolutely ridiculous and unhinged. I just started posting them. I could still find them out there, and it's like just weird day one learning Unreal Engine. And so it was like 3D scanned me on like a dolly. I just put it in like the third person template, and it's just like doing 360s and like climbing up towers. And I was like scanning buildings back then. I was like just throwing it in there, and just kept doing that pretty much every day for the last like 7 years.
I have to say we have failed in our podcast research. How did we not find those videos?
Yeah,
that's the only thing we missed out. We're gonna look for them. We're gonna look for them after this.
It's all over the place. So it makes sense to not find them.
I want to talk about the time where you were a cinematographer. Before we get into the Unreal part and everything, does everybody in your role do the previs themselves, or usually is that done by somebody else? Because as you mentioned, your agent or whoever was pitching for you said that's your feature. You come in and you're going to do the previs as well, and you did it, I'm assuming, better than a lot of people because you did the 3D work and made sure everything is done right. Based on our previous conversations with the cinematographer at the creative, for instance, previs is such an important part. Yeah, such an important part of the process. And that's why I'm assuming the fact that your role was so crucial and why Epic Games also reached out. So I want to know, was that something that a lot of people in your role would do, or was that your unique thing?
It's pretty unique. There was only like 2 other DPs that I know that would do it like around the level I was doing it. And I would say that it's not a skill that every shoot needs. Not every director even plans at all. So it would certainly bring me into very specific shoots, and they would be very technical shoots. But I liked that. I liked being on, I was like secretly liked 3D a lot. So the shoots I gravitated towards were like on a stage. We're starting from nothing. We're going to build every single thing that will be on camera is going to be built, except for the humans, I suppose. And so like that lends itself to planning, because it's like, hey, it's like, how big a stage are we getting? It's like, I don't know, how big is the wall, right? It's like, so these are very nebulous conversations sometimes. So planning really previs lends itself to that, and that would get me into those shoots much earlier in my career than I probably would have been otherwise. But like, if it's like, hey, it's a handheld shoot, we're going to go into like 5 different countries over the next week, it's like, yeah, we're not probably prevising that. Right? And if it's very narrative based, which like Jody Lee Lipes is a DP, I like always respected their work. It's like it's more like traditional narrative still. It's like that doesn't usually get pre-visualized as much. It's not really needed. It's kind of like you kind of feel it. It's like this room's feeling very warm over here, and we're gonna go over there and we're filming, and it's like more of a documentary kind of approach, which is really popular back then. So So no, most DPs don't, and most jobs don't require it either. But it was what I specialized in, and kind of with my like wanting to work in 3D background, it was like this is like kind of the 3D of live action here. It's like I'm planning it in 3D. We're gonna execute it with robots. The lights are all on dimmer boards. It's kind of makes sense.
Makes sense. And was this around this time the idea of Cinetracer? And for those who are listening who don't know, Cinetracer is a cinematography visualization app made by Matt. So did the idea came around that time to make an app that everybody now can use?
So it started off with just making assets for like plugins and assets for Maya. I never made it for Blender, but for Cinema 4D, and then make them for Unreal Engine, because like making the whole app is kind of like it's a lot more than just making the cameras. I'm just make the cameras and I'll be done. It's like that's pretty chill. Yeah. But when Epic reached out to me to bring this kind of stuff to Unreal Engine, I did not know Unreal Engine. I didn't know how to write a U plugin. I didn't know how to make anything there. So I couldn't really make assets for the engine. I was like, let me just try making a game, right? It's like, I just need to learn this. So like, let me just put my cameras in here, a couple of 3D scan people, and like pre-built locations. You couldn't even build anything. And the thing that I released, which is absolutely unhinged, I'm about to do it again, actually something similar. It was one level, awful level. It's like a warehouse. And you could move around 3D scan people, put up one camera and like one light, and I released it. I put it on Steam.
Oh my God.
I put it on Steam, and I put it up for $90. $90 on
what?
Steam.
Wow.
So game developers are like, what is this? But for context, like the Cinema 4D plugin I was making before this was $500, it was like all the assets and a plugin and all this stuff. And it was targeted towards Cinema 4D users who were spending $3,000 is it a year? Anyway, it's pretty expensive to get into that ecosystem in general. And premium plugins and assets at that point were about that price point. That's what I put it at. There were eventually hundreds of people that would go on to use that. So I was like, if I'm going to put all this stuff together into like an app and like actually do this, it's like I can't be like 20, like an indie game. I was like, that will never turn into a business for me, because it's like a small market, I thought at the time. It's like, so we would price higher. And I was like, I never thought like the general public, I don't know what that means, but like kind of the general creative public would ever be into it. It was like, hey, people who use my stuff in cinema, here's like this kind of like experimental Unreal Engine thing, which is like significantly less, and it's kind of experimental, and we'll see how it goes. And so that's how it started. And
one camera and one light.
It was like, and I think those videos are private, but I could find them from the early demos. And I was streaming on Twitch at the time. It was like multiplayer at one point. It would have like users come in, like we had like multi people flying around. It was chaos. It was like anyone who makes like their first like indie game, except it was just the whole point was to take screenshots and plan. And it must have been it was like such a different Epic Games back then. Like that project early on this is pre-Mega Grant, and one's the wrong word, they don't like saying that, was awarded, I think it was called an Unreal Grant back then. It was before the Mega Grants. So okay. They told me to apply for it back then, and it was awarded one back then, and it was like a front page story on EpicGames.com, on the Epic Games website, which is like
holy shit.
That I could find it. It's like literally my train level. It's like a Decagon train dragged into a level. I was like, hey. And then a bit later on, as like virtual production like really hit, they were like really, really pushing it.
This is like Mandalorian time, right?
Yeah, a little bit right before that. They, I presented at GDC for them. I was like main stage on one of the main stage presentations at like the SIGGRAPH user group. It was like a big one, and they really like blasted it and supported it like a lot in the beginning. So a lot of this is Epic has helped like quite a bit. I've always just been doing the kind of cameras and stuff I've been doing, but they really like elevated it quite a bit.
Damn, I can see why you're wearing that Unreal cap now. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What was the transition like going from physical cinematographer, DP before COVID, and then as we talked about, this was during COVID time when you started with Cinetracer, to going into becoming essentially a game dev?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of the transition point. I had moved to this house. So before Cinetracer, I was like half working as a DP, half building like plugins, but it wasn't enough from the plugins to like make it my full-time job at that point. And there's a lot of people who do that in the film industry. They work like on set pretty high up usually, and they develop software for it and tools, and they kind of feed each other, but it's like maybe not enough to like actually sustain it. But when I don't remember like the exact turning point, but eventually Cinetracer started to pick up like a lot of steam and on Steam, and it was selling enough that I was like,
I just got that. Yeah, I just got that. Yeah, sorry, forgive us. It's an internet delay. Internet delay.
But at a certain point, it was making enough that it became my full time, and I still to this day have a hard time distinguishing between like making a game, because it's certainly not, and making an app, and it's always been this like weird hybrid back and forth, and I'm making another one of these like sort of like, oh, is it a game? Is it an app? But that's Unreal Engine, and so I credit them that it's like possible to make that. But yeah, at a certain point, it was selling well enough and hit mainstream. Not mainstream. It's not like a mainstream game, but like a lot more people than like the couple thousand cinematographers I was looking for. It's just much, much bigger than that.
I want to know with Cinetracer, for anybody that is hearing about it for the first time, what is the biggest problem that you're trying to solve?
So right now it's becoming slightly redundant because Unreal Engine is such a good place to do Previs. There's just no question. Like real-time rendering, like metahumans are free. You just download them. Lighting doesn't require the four 1080 Ti's anymore. Like you do pretty good on almost like, any reasonable computer. But I would say is time. It's still faster for most filmmakers to open something that is like pre-made. Like I use metahumans, but they're completely wrapped. You just drag them out. The clothes is right there. It's all in there. You don't have to do like any coding or anything like that. I use my mocap system. It's like the mocap, the clothing, boom, they're ready to go. Change their hair out. Like I've downloaded the entire MetaHuman Creator app, and you can configure it. It's all just like instantly there. So that's primarily the main thing at this point. Is it's just going to be a lot faster. It's cooked, if that makes any sense. So it's like there's no waiting for shaders to compile. So filmmakers don't really have, I would say, a lot of time to do previs and planning. Typically, it's not paid. It's not a paid part of it. It is for me, or it was, but it's hard to bid that. So I try to make it as fast as possible while keeping the quality. So it's like it does one thing. Like I don't know but it has like one focus, right? So it's like you're dragging out a camera, you're putting these people in, the lights go there, we take a screenshot, and I'm thinking of these like 15-minute sessions where it's really, really fast. So certainly this type of work can be done, should be done in Blender, Unreal Engine. Those are all really good, but it does usually take a little bit longer, and there's a bit of a learning curve. So I sort of see it as like kind of like a good stepping stone to get into Unreal Engine previs and that sort of thing, if you ever go there. But for a lot of people that use Cinetracer, previs is not their goal. They don't want to be good 3D artists. They don't want to learn how to, make clothes from metahumans and stuff like that. Yeah. They're like literally like, how do I get a storyboard done like as fast as possible? And it's also like the language around it is wrapped in a way that is like friendly for a filmmaker, a live action filmmaker, right? So like if you're like, hey, I want to learn how to do previs in whatever DCC, Unreal Engine, Blender, whatever, it's like, that's very 3D. And they're like, what are these words? Like, we don't talk like that on set. In the game, in my context, in this world, Cinetracer and the other things I make, it's all translated back to filmmaking terms. So try to speak the language and make it fast, really.
Right.
Makes sense. Let's talk about making the Cinetracer. So you developed Cinetracer on your own. Mm-hmm. What was the biggest challenge making it?
To plug, if I can, I am speaking at Unreal Fest this year in Seattle on this exact topic. They just announced it like today. So by the time this goes out, it should be legal to say that.
Yeah.
But literally Andy Blondin, who is works on like broadcast and virtual production at Epic, he's the one that contacted me, brought me in. I was like, cool. How does this work? I do like nothing. And let me tell you, back then, there were no YouTubers teaching this. None. There was nobody. I was like, oh, I want to like make, it's like, no. There's literally nothing. It was just like the live streams from Epic, which were great, but not as approachable as like the stuff you make. And there's a lot more now. So he literally showed me how to take a variable in a class and have that drive something spinning. That's it. And that's what my talk's going to talk about a little bit too. And it was like,
that's how Cinetracer was born.
Now go build the app. Now go build the app. I thought you everything that you need.
and it was that, yeah, and with the handful of YouTubers and the documentation back then. And I did have a computer science background, which helped a little bit, but it was very different to learn games because it's real time. Like it's always ticking. Whereas I was making apps before where it was just static. Like picture Blender, Maya, timeline. The timeline never moves zero mostly. Whereas games are just always moving. It's like always ticking. So it's just a different way of programming. But it literally started with if there's a float, and this is going programming, but it's like there's a float on this actor called height. If I change that number to 1, we move the cube up 10. And it's like, okay. And then it just went from there. And there were no metahumans. And so getting 3D people to move, now it's so easy for people. Just download the metahuman. But back then it was a struggle. And it's why it took me so long to make it reasonable, I think. It was it's tough. But yeah, it started off with one float drives the position of an object. And once you get that, you can kind of go from there.
How long did it take for the first version of Cinetracer to be done? From the moment you began to the moment it was released? From the float to the moment you released it publicly?
I could go look on Instagram or the actual launch date, but I want to say it was maybe 6 months or something like that, roughly.
Damn,
I also streamed.
That's still very good. That's still
very good.
Yeah, but it was
no YouTube video and nothing.
But it was very bad. So extremely
disclaimer.
Extremely bad. But yeah, something like that because it was experimental. Again, if you if this was your business plan, what I've done, and you pitch this to anyone, it would be this is nothing. What are you talking? It was just this is nonsense. This makes no sense this doesn't make sense to anybody, but that's what it did. And it went okay. But yeah, I would, it was experimental at the time. I would say that much. I wasn't oh, this is going to be my life. I was hey, what if we made a game out of this and see if people liked it? Does it even work? That's still so much of my life is is this going to work? And I would just put it out there. And it did. But yeah, it was something around that time. I was also streaming on Twitch back then. I've streamed on Twitch, deleted the channel, streamed on Twitch again, deleted the channel again. But these are other idiosyncrasies I have.
Okay, I'm trying to figure something out. And I'm going to get to my final question. How much time did you spend on a daily basis or on a weekly basis developing Cinetracer?
Well, at that time, it was probably at least 8 hours a day, something like that.
So every day.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Every day for sure. And I'm in one of those now, right? It's back then it was still this basement, but it was just it was it was this computer actually, the one I'm using here for my this is my Zoom call computer now. It's Old Faithful. I think the early Cinetracer builds are probably still on this thing actually somewhere. But yeah,
load it up.
I think all the beta branches are on Steam, so we could go back in the time machine. But yeah, I was down here literally. Pretty sure it was there. Yeah, every day. But those are fun. Those are fun grinds. And even back then, I would be here's this cursed build I made today. It's going on Instagram. It's going on YouTube. Yeah. And and I've heard it brought the user base in. There's that, so it got people, they're this looks cool. Let's give it a shot. But surprisingly, really serious people also watched me goofing around in Unreal Engine, and they've told me about that. And it's had its influence on the serious side of the industry too, which I'm always amazed at. But people have told me that they're hey, I saw what you were building back then, and it kind of got me starting to build what I'm doing now. I'm not naming names at the moment, but so put it out there I do still. But yeah, it was definitely an everyday for months kind of thing to get it out. Yeah.
Wow. So what I'm trying to get to is this: if you're spending 8 hours a day on a project where yourself is difficult to achieve, and you yourself are saying that even the first version was pretty bad compared to what you imagined it to be, how did you drive yourself to get up and work on something for 8 hours a day? Usually there's a lot of thought that goes in every single day. There's a voice in the back of our head when we're working on something that we're unsure of. It's telling you to give up. What made you not give up during those 6 months and perhaps even later on?
Yeah, I'm in one of those sprints now, actually.
Okay.
I usually have I've tried task managing like apps and stuff like that, like Trello, and like make like big mind maps and like future roadmaps and stuff like that. Like, but like back then and even like today now, I pretty much like try to go to bed with something I want to try the next day and let that cook overnight while I'm sleeping or just like watching like, you know, YouTube videos or whatever, you know, going to bed. And like, that's my thing. I need to get up that morning and like, it's like, can I do this? Is this possible? And I don't have like a big perfect plan with like perfect task breakdown. It's usually just like one thing. And like yesterday's for me was like, I'm building like a new thing called Cam Op Simulator, which is kind of similar to what I have built. But I was like, can we get this metahuman as an AI walking around the level, doing the collisions right, and it works on macOS, specifically on a specific hardware at a frame rate that I want. And I posted that video like 10 minutes ago, and it worked, and it worked. And so it's kind of like this series of like, there's this one problem, I'm going to bed, let's try it in the morning and get it to work. And I guess I've just like been able to like also keep in mind like what the long-term point of that one problem is. But I've been solving like one problem overnight for like years, and I still basically have that. I should plan what my one is for tomorrow, but I've got a long list, so we just kind of pick it.
Do you want us to throw you
It's beautiful that you say that, because breaking down a complex task or a complex problem into small mini steps is always going to keep you motivated. Because if you're just looking at one big giant task, you're always going to get stressed about it, and it's going to be so difficult for you to tackle that problem. Whereas if you break it down into tiny steps that you say you do every single night before you go to bed, let it cook, let you get excited about what you're going to do the next day, that's a very interesting way to keep yourself motivated.
Yeah, and target the research too to do it. Like, it's like there's like just like hyper specific problem. One, I'll tweet it. Two, if it's a huge problem, I'm going on Discord and messaging people I know. And then also target search that on YouTube. And I feel like that's how I found some of your videos. Is like, you know, I was not much of a sequencer user for a long time. Now it's like all I do. But like I've always been afraid of keyframes. Still am. But I do it a lot now, especially with the mocap. And it's like, yeah, like the thing I'm making now is very sequencer based. And I'm pretty sure some of your stuff has come up because it's like, I'm so bad at sequencer. Or I was. I'm okay now.
This is crazy that we watch each other's videos. We're watching your MetaHuman videos and how you animated it. It's fucking crazy. I love that.
I remember, you know, we usually work at two different stations, but just maybe 2 meters apart. And whenever Farah screams, it means that he found a new video, that the video does something that we cannot do, and then he will show it me. Most of the time, it's your video with MetaHumans, and it's crazy. I wanted to ask, because you said you are now developing another app or game, whichever you want to call it, or it's another sprint. How is this development now different from the time that you were building Cinetracer 1? And I want to consider all the YouTube videos. We have AI at your disposal. What are the changes?
So what I'm building now is sort of like a smaller version of Cinetracer, or like from a feature set, but it's more focused. So mostly what I'm building now, I have done already. I'm just sort of like, it's the end user uses it in a different way. So Cinetracer is way more of like an open, empty world. You just drag assets into, like you would in UE5. They move them around, they take screenshots, and that's it. You make a storyboard. What I'm making now is more like pre-made levels. So like it's very sequencer based. So the stuff that you had shown, you know, it's like someone walks around, a scene happens, it's pre-made, it's like a cinematic. And the person's job is just to follow it with a camera. So it's just a camera operating simulator. But people have wanted this for a very long time because it's specifically being controlled by wheels, which I wish I had them with me. They're upstairs. But it's something that's been requested for a very long time from my user base to make. So the difference now is what I know how to make a game from like a class design point of view, getting the metahumans to move. I've been making metahuman mocap for the last like 2 years. Like most of this stuff I've figured out already. So it's this nice kind of like fresh start. It's like, I like know how to approach this from like a high level point of view. And now it's a lot more about like execution. Like, are these levels like entertaining? Can they look good? And also like performance. So it's very different. It's great to be at this point now. Where it's like, like that project is like, I could probably make that in like a good prototype in like 6 months. I'm pretty sure. And it's like, I can sort of eyeball as like, okay, if we're gonna add like content every couple like, once a month or something like that, that seems pretty doable. So I don't know. I just have a lot more experience, like basically stumbling over making Cinetrace over the last 7 years. I just have like a lot more like, I think, understanding of what it takes to produce it. So it's much nicer. It's much nicer now. But I don't think I knew back. I didn't know back then to be afraid. I think that's maybe the one of the defining traits. I don't know to be afraid of this stuff. I just kind of do it. But it's much nicer now. Yeah, I have like a much better idea on how to get this produced.
Is there any coding involved in what you're doing, or are you doing majority of the stuff with blueprints?
Coding meaning C++. I only do blueprints now. I do not touch C++. I know C++, and that's how I know I do not want to get into it.
I know it, and I don't want to touch it.
Pretty much, yeah. Cinetracer 1 has like some C++ stuff in it, because like it's like, oh, I know C and Unreal Engine C, let's get into it. And it's a C++ project. It makes some classes, and there's some performance gains for sure. Certain projects have to have C++ base. There's no question, especially games. But the stuff that I make primarily is not going to get bogged down by running it completely in blueprints. So I like blueprints. It's much easier to migrate to the next engine version. I had this still haunts me. There was some build of Cinetracer, and they deprecated one of their pointers in C, and it became like a shared pointer, and I just didn't know what that meant. And it was just,
I have no idea what that means. If you don't know what it means, we
Two
don't know what it
computer
means.
science graduates. I really don't know what did you guys study back in uni. Both of you are computer science.
I was playing games, man, at the time.
Oh man, like the programmers are like, this is no big deal, like the coders, the engineers, but like I know that I like to stay away from that. When things go wrong in C, man, did they go wrong. It's like so wrong. And talk about not having like, too much places to go on YouTube or resources. There's just less resources when something goes wrong in C. It's just like, because you've made your own nightmare of a code base, and it's like, oh, they're switching out this like core technology, and it's like, how do you fix that? And it's just like, nobody knows. And that's why the engineers make so much money at these game companies, because it's hard, and it's really like no man's land to be in the code of it. So my projects are all blueprints. I will go into C++ if I need to expose a couple functions. Currently, I'm graphing data, and actually that's really slow in Blueprint, so that's maybe something I would do in C++. But I try to stay very far from it these days if I can. It's like if there's something that like needs C, I will build something else. I will find a different way instead. And because it's just me programming and doing all the art and all the mocap and all the UI and all the marketing. So it's like C will just slow me down too much unless there's like something super specific. But I try not to go to C++ if I can avoid it. Yeah.
That's the crazy part. Me and Farad were talking about this. How the hell do you do everything you do? I mean, you're literally doing everything. And what's interesting is the different skill sets that you have is quite varied. You are one day doing Vicon motion capture with metahumans, and then the next day you're making clothes. And I think it was a couple of months ago you bought this book, or you went to the library and you're learning like physical clothes, how to make physical clothes. And you're taking that.
That happened, yeah.
Yeah. So whatever is interesting to you just decide to learn it yourself.
Part of the overnight challenges, I sleep tomorrow. I have to make my own clothes.
Yeah. So not everything is all. This is like a very positive. I like it. Looking back at like the stuff I've done, but I will say that like there's been times where I've been led in a direction that may not have been the most like, I would say at least financially smart place to focus a year of time. I'm sort of recovering from some of that actually, right? So it's like I just, tunneled into this one subject and it made $1 million. It's like, no, there's definitely been some like misses in the approaches I've done to some of these projects. But yes, it is, I am a generalist. But then I'm a generalist, but I go really deep in a certain direction. Like I was really into
how you were like a generalist and a specialist, because you are making freaking amazing metahuman clothing. It's not like that's not a general. A generalist is probably me. Marvelous is that I can open the software. I can probably make a rope. I
spent too long. Well, I'm talking pure business wise. I think I spent too long focusing on that. But I am able to make clothing. I sell it on the marketplace. I want a skin for my game. I just make it, so like that is helpful. But there's been stretches where it's like I've gone too long in that direction. I can talk about a failure. not too long ago. So when Metahumans first came out, I was like, we're making a VTuber app. This is the future. Meta, Facebook was still called Facebook. It wasn't called Meta back then. And I was like, I'm into this. I didn't have a Vicon system. I was like, we're making a VTuber app with metahumans, and the content's on LinkedIn. The cringy content of all that is all out there. You can look at my timeline. I'm not lying here. So I spent like a year building that. This is UE5 early release. Couldn't package. Wouldn't work. So couldn't get it to work. I was like, hey, we should make Cinetracer 2. Or basically, I was like, I should upgrade Cinetracer to UE5, but you couldn't back then. UE5 early, so you couldn't really do it. And even 5.1, it was like, nah. Like 5.2 even was like not quite. I didn't feel confident to ship on those ones yet. So I built a VTuber app with metahumans, and I went real deep on it, really deep, building like IK solvers and control rig. But this is how I learned control rig. This is how I learned these things. The things I learned during that period, I use now. But that ended up, I did that for a very long time, or it felt like a very long time. It's like a year, maybe a year and a half. And that app I never launched.
Oh my god!
I built it. It was called Citizen. It was the VTuber around it was called Citizen Meta 1, which some people may know.
Oh yes, Citizen Meta 1. Okay, yeah, I do know. Yes, I just realized. Okay, that makes sense now.
But then that morphed into the Vicon project, which is then what is more known now. But it started off as me making a VTuber app in UE5 early release, which was rough, and it was VR based. So like it was cool though. I still think I could have sold a bunch of it, but I sort of like got to a point where I was like, this is not like, I was like, what is the business? Like, who is this for? But I was so into like, oh my God, we have 3D metahumans. We got to make a move. And I didn't have a Vicon suit,
Wait.
So I spent a long time on that.
Question. Sorry, I got to interject. So the app that you were making, was it the one where you were basically creating controls that would help control metahumans in an easier manner?
Yeah. It was like,
I commented under that video.
Oh.
I commented under that video like a long time ago. I was asking for those. Yeah. I thought it was part of Unreal Engine. And I realized I cannot find this shit. So that's what you were developing.
Yeah, like picture VR chat. If you've ever heard of VR chat, it's like people in VR, and they have a pretty good system of tracking hands and fingers. And I was like, hey, Valve Index fingers, like Valve Index controllers, the knuckles, how do you make those controllers move metahuman hands? And at the time, I had a good couple contacts at Epic, and they showed me the new control rig. Control rig was new back then. And I was like, this is great. And I had the fingers moving, and then we wrote an IK rig for it. And I was like, is there a business I could make around this? Like, could this be something? And the hype for the metaverse was real back then. So people were like, this is the metaverse. And, but then you kind of reality I was like, this isn't really like a company I think I want to run. I was like, it was another, like, it requires a lot of expensive equipment to run it. It's like, you need a fast computer, you need a VR system and whatnot. So I spent a long time building that to never release it. And so that was a pretty rough dead end for me. But I will say, I spent a year and a half learning metahumans, and I had like alpha metahumans, like before they were like out publicly, and learned control rig. And my knowledge of metahumans comes from spending a year and a half trying to make them move, writing my own mocap system essentially. But I will say
now you're using it.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say the positive of that project's dead end, which financially just never turned into a product, is that Vicon saw it. Vicon is like is a big motion capture company. They make the cameras and the little dots you see on people in like the big games and movies. They saw that silliness and they were like, why don't you try a Vicon system instead of that? Because it's like, and so like literally that failure of a project did lead to Vicon, which now I use almost like, every other day and drives a big part of the business I have now. So while it certainly closed one door at the end of that VTuber, trying to make a VTuber app, it opened up the Vicon one, which was amazing. And then that was like another like year of, I think, successful R&D. But that took a while to learn as well.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to point out. The failure that you were considering brought you so many lessons that now you're using in your current work, current app, the current project that you're working on. So of course, 1 year the app wasn't released, but I think the lessons from that app is now throughout your day-to-day life.
Yeah, that's the silver lining. I don't know what the other color lining is, but the one that's bad is that didn't turn into a product, which is not good. That's bad for me. I need to.
So what do you know more now from the financial perspective of things and business perspective of things that you can perhaps teach other people? What advice would you give to people who might be about to go down on a path that could take them potentially a year or two, take up their savings while they're developing a game or a movie, a feature film, a short film, not a feature film, a short film? What advice do you have for them?
I'm not sure everyone can stomach it, and every product should be released this way. But what has worked for me is you could call it market testing, and building your user base early and getting their feedback early. For me, I don't do Kickstarters or things like of that nature. I'll just literally do paid betas. That's not going to work for every company. If you paid beta a game, that's tricky. Like an actual game, that's a rough one. But for the stuff that I build, I usually put out a video on one of my platforms, and if a couple people are they're like, what was that? We would love to try that. I forget. It sounds like a very Gary Vee thing, but it's like if one person would buy your product, there's probably more people that would buy it, right? So as I put out these sketches and guesses into the world, someone's like, what was that? And someone messaged me on LinkedIn or add me on LinkedIn. They're like, we saw this. It's we're pretty interested in that. And so once I catch a couple of those, I start building a user base around that, usually on social somewhere, and I just put all the sketches in there, and they're rough and they're horrible, but the people that want it, they see what's good about it. And I'm doing that now around Cam Op Simulator. Luckily, that's a subsect of kind of the business I already do run, so it's it's not. I'm not building it from scratch. I could convert over 50,000 people to that immediately on social. But I'm very much build in the open, and the business model, good or bad, is paid beta. For me, works pretty well. It's I try to be as transparent as possible. It's you're buying this, it's a paid beta. It's going to be bad. It's going to be awful. But you're here because you want to support it. You'd like to see it do better. Start up the Discord channel. Those early adopters probably have the best feedback early on. And so I'm doing it better now. If I could talk about another failure.
Yeah, let's go.
These are very recent. I'm all failures the last couple of years. But there's been a few. So I tried to rebuild Cinetracer 2. I tried to rebuild Cinetracer as Cinetracer 2. This did not go well. This is the end of this short didn't go great. So I wanted to simplify Cinetracer even more, make it even more of a game. Mm-hmm. So I made it first person. I tried to make it a simulator game where you had tools that would come out, and simplify it and support controller, because certain people were asking for that. And I put it out there, and I started building in the open. The track record's still there. As much as I would love to scrub that off the internet and just delete all of those, they're still there. And that was received horribly, really badly.
Oh man. Really?
What they didn't like?
So people got used to, and understandably, got really used to how Cinetracer 1 works, which it's a weird formula of how it works. When you're fresh coming into it, it's a weird ecosystem, but it was built from this community from the ground up over 6 years of this is what we like, this is what we don't like, this is what we like, we don't like, and we built it up. Cinetracer 2, I was I would like to redo that, think of a new way. User base did not want a new way. They wanted they wanted the way that works, that we'd built up, just in UE5 with some of the new tech. I was let's just do a whole new thing. And I did it for too long. Way too long. So Cinetracer 2 is mostly negative reviews on Steam from the user base that's, trying to transition from CT1 to CT2. And they're this isn't what we want. So it was sort of a mistake to call it Cinetracer 2, because it was really a reimagining. It should have been a different project name, probably. So that didn't go great. And that was a paid beta. You could buy it. You could try it early. And I would get the feedback from it. And I was no, I swear it's going to be good. We're going to make a new thing. It's going to be better. But so another thing is certainly to listen to the user base early. And there was pushback for months on this. And I was no, I swear it's going to be good. We're going to make it like this. It's going to be great. And in the last couple, I think it was a couple months ago, I was finally okay, everyone hates this. Let's rebuild it the way that they want it, which makes sense. And that's what I did. And so that paperwork's out there. The trail is there. I rebuilt it in a more agreeable way to the original user base, and people like it now. They love it, and it's it has all the new UE5 stuff and whatnot. But so sort of the pros and cons of the paid beta approach is the feedback comes in real hot. So
yeah,
try to keep the early feedback in mind.
Can I, first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate your honesty to talk about this. I know it's not easy because it's something that you spend a lot of time on, and to hear people's direct feedback. And I'm sure some of them were harsh because people don't hold back on the internet.
You can read the reviews.
Especially if they paid. Yeah, if they paid, they don't care. And they don't understand there's another person behind it all. And having spoken with you, the thing I'm trying to say is having spoken with you and having seen your content, we know how much you actually care about what you're putting out there. You're not just trying to give me money for this application. We know that because of the track record that you have. That's what I'm saying. I appreciate your honesty to come and talk about this. And Farhad, please, I know you had a question.
I wanted to talk about the paid closed beta concept.
Yeah.
Joey, Joey, CEO of School of Motion, he also had this concept, and he said it's so important. He was saying that the closed beta is so important because if you go tell your friends, I have this app, they will all say, I will buy it. The moment you ask for their credit card numbers, nobody will give you their credit cards numbers. So you have to actually make sure people pay, and then they will give you their constructive feedback. That I think it's very, very important when you're developing something.
Yeah, unless it's like, you want to like market hard on release. Like how traditional game marketing, the games should be pretty done probably before even the betas happen and whatnot. But that's not the kind of company I run at this point. Kickstarters have done well I've never done them, but I've also seen Kickstarters do really well for people. I'm just always like, I would just rather like give you like a horrible build to try, than take money and then like be like, it never came out. Like if I had Kickstarted, the project around Citizen Meta 1, I could have gotten people involved. Like there's no question, but I never put it out. And so I've run this cycle a couple more times now. And now I am personally as a single solo, like, pretty happy and know I can sort of deliver paid beta. And I'm doing another one with we're starting that up pretty soon. And it's like, I know how to run these. We're going to listen to the early feedback from the people who would pay for something that's like broken, right? Like not working yet, but they see the concept. They're like, they need it. They want this to work. It's like that feedback is like crucial. So I've listened a lot more in the development phase of that. It's like, I have my vision for it. That's what it's going to get us, the first couple of things built, but then it sort of becomes like what everybody else wants, unless you want mostly negative reviews like I have on Cinetracer 2 at the moment, which I take as a lesson. I was like, we can't like do our own thing too hard without you can't ignore the user base that much, even if it's like the thing I want to have come out. That's just like that's just my current example. So this is my like atonement for it. I was like, I'm sorry. People like it now, but there was at least 6 months of people being like, "What are you building? Like, we don't like this. This isn't how we want it to work." And I was just like, "No, let me try to get it out." And it just didn't go.
Listen,
didn't go
the balance is quite difficult to achieve. I don't know why, but there's this example rising up in my head as you're talking about all of this. I used to play a lot of League of Legends and a little bit of Dota. A lot of Mobile Legends, all of these games where there's 100+ characters that you play, and then usually you have this one character that you made that you absolutely love, and you love that character because you're strong with it. And then boom, League of Legends, Riot Games goes and changes, updates the character, and boom, suddenly your character is fucking powerless, can't do shit, you just die in all the team fights. And the entire population that mains that character will be mad on forums, on YouTube, on Twitch live streams.
Yeah.
And then that's Riot Games' decision. Are they going to change it? Are they going to buff the character, nerf the character? Usually, Riot Games needs to have the vision. They can't always listen to everybody because it's their game at the end of the day, and they know what's right and what's wrong. But they also do listen to the public. They do take hints from the public. So I know from video games that it's a constant challenge every single month with every single update. So what you're trying to do right now makes perfect sense. You release things that thought were what people wanted, and the public has showed you, okay, you know what, we might want it this way. And now you just have to sort of merge your vision with what you think the public would want, and that's when I think you'll have the perfect product.
Yeah, if such a thing is possible. But yeah, I think early the feedback is important. But I could also see like the auteur, like author theory of some sort of, project. It's like, don't listen to anybody and just make the thing that you want. Yeah. But that's certainly at your own peril. And it's more for like, again, from like the app's point of view, like there's not like, I don't think there's not like a lot of like art vision perhaps as much for like an app. I mean, there is like a certain, but like a game and a movie, it's like, oh, this has a strong singular kind of vision, like Arcane's like art style or something like that. It's like if someone early on was like, this looks cartoony, we don't like it. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. We're making it like this, you know, like there's certainly that. Yeah. But for apps, when you're trying to make a useful hammer, if the hammer's not hammering, you know, like, and people tell you the hammer's not hammering, you should immediately not do what I did. You should try to fix the hammer. But yeah, it is a balance for sure. Because like people ask for things and they don't understand like the technical requirements, and it's just like, no, that's not going to happen. But yeah, anyway, I had way too many warnings about how that was going. But anyway, so I've had a couple duds, but most of them I've turned around in some way.
I want to know your thoughts on UEFN and the future of Fortnite, because we've seen on your X, on your channel, that you've been experimenting with UEFN as well.
Yeah. So I was in the alpha for UEFN, testing early, and I was like, once there's metahumans in here, this is going to be awesome, because like I've invested so much time into metahumans, I'm just like committed now. So that was like my main feedback, and I did some like mocap in the alpha beta and put that out there, and I was like, that's what I want. And then kind of left for a little while because it was real raw in the beginning. It's still very new, but I couldn't. Yeah. There was no persistence. You couldn't save, and like there was so much I wanted, like couldn't be there. Now, however, it's really good. So I have been looking at building. Guess what? Cinetracer in Fortnite. Building the stuff that I build there. And it's close to possible. So for me, it's like. Very interesting because it's natively multiplayer, which I decided early on to not do multiplayer. I got multiplayer working and then learned enough to not make a multiplayer game because it's solo. It's just like everything is way harder in multiplayer. But then Fortnite comes around and, you know, I see it as like it's a 3D world. We can have multiple users in it. I can bring my camera stuff in there, and I could make a form of Cinetracer in there. And then also I'm, you know, really interested in building kind of like cinematic experiences in there too, which anytime I add anything like that to my apps, because they're apps, they're not games, people are like, we don't want this. It's literally the feedback. So I'm kind of interested in kind of like flexing sort of like a creative linear thing over there. And on top of that, there's a lot of interesting contract work specifically around UEFN right now, which is pretty interesting. So I've been contacted by a couple companies to build islands there in a certain style. So it's a pretty interesting ecosystem. It's similar to like when Epic Games was like, ever heard of Unreal Engine? I'm like, nope. You know, it's kind of like that there as well. I don't think that I'm probably going to make like the next viral game mode that gets like, you know, concurrent 100,000 players or something like that. But I do think that there's some fun opportunities for me to build kind of the stuff I've built in UE5 there. So I'm very interested in it. And since GDC, I think is when Metahumans got released for it. Yeah. So, you know, I'm there testing testing that stuff out as much as I can.
I think UEFN is definitely a very cool opportunity for artists to go ahead and showcase some of their creative work inside Fortnite. It's something that wasn't possible before. Yes, of course, we had the Roblox, but there's nothing like the graphical fidelity of Fortnite if you're comparing that to Roblox. And the possibilities of now bringing in metahumans and things of that sort is crazy. We made our own UEFN map, and the entire experience leading up to the publishing of the map was wonderful. We loved it. Working in teams online.
The version control.
Version control is so
Why don't you put
good.
that in Unreal Engine itself?
Yeah, it should be native in Unreal Engine. It's fucking crazy. It's perfect when you're working with other people and you're just bringing in assets, and then boom, you hit simulate and you're inside Fortnite and you have this giant photogrammetry asset that you have. It's a joy to create in there. But then the pain came when 1 week before publishing, they released a new update and the fucking collisions broke. We had to change our entire game literally 2 days before we published. Yeah. So these things are I think the main disadvantage, because you don't have control over what comes out. And if the update comes in and it breaks your game, you just have to be careful about that. And it happened to us. It doesn't happen to everybody. It happened to us. So now we are more careful about taking in jobs or contracts when it comes to UEFN, because you can't, how can you say that to a client? Like, hey, 1 day before we publish, shit might go down. So that's the only thing. But aside from that, we had a wonderful experience creating it. And definitely recommend people who are watching and listening to give it a try at least one time. I think it's a joy.
I remember, like a while back, I did this like LED project shoot with Epic Games, like the motorcycle like LED wall shoot.
Yeah.
I was on stage for that, shooting that for like a month with them, and I remember getting dinner with someone from Epic, and I was just explaining, like probably drunkenly, a little bit like building Cinetrace, and I was like, I wish there was this like managed Unreal Engine ecosystem. I was like, I don't want to set up my own Perforce. It's like, I don't want to have to set up like microtransactions and like, DLC stuff. And it's like, I just want to build it, And like, that is UEFN in like 5 years from now, pretty much. It's like, UEFN is Fortnite. That's where the player base is. But, once you can spin off that, cloud hosted assets and, native multiplayer and native payment systems, like with Fab is coming in the future and stuff like that. It's like, that is what I want. I don't want to have to build like the infrastructure backend server stuff of like a live service game. But I would like to use those things. So it's like, Roblox, but it's, Unreal Engine. So I'm very much looking, I look at using UEFN as kind of practice and a preview of what UE6 will look like, basically, which I think is
interesting.
Like 10 years from 2 years ago, from whenever Tim said that, is like UE6 is like, is all those things, the cloud managed and like all the backends like set up for you, but it's just straight UE6. It's not Fortnite based and it's not UE5. People will still build their own like standalone UE5 stuff, but I would rather build it in like the Epic Games, Fortnite, when Fortnite and UE6 are the same exact thing, is what I've wanted like for a very long time. So I'm pretty excited about that. But it is like, you're just living at the razor's edge, because it's like me, I locked Cinetracer 2, which is UE5. I was 5.2 for a long time, only just came to 5.4. That's not how Fortnite works, as you know. They're in UE5.5, and it's like, hey, we're pushing this new thing. It broke. It's like, tough.
Well, wait for the next update.
So I don't know if their UE6 cloud version, will have like, let's just stay static. But it's something I've wanted as a developer for a long time, because like, I'll just like, this is like the very dev side of it, but like, if you've ever programmed UIs to support mouse and controller, is extremely difficult. It is extremely hard to support both. And I know that because I dropped controller support for Cinetracer 2, because I tried it. It's very, very hard. Even with common UI and the frameworks, I think when enhanced input and common UI are out of beta and like they're fully working together for UE6, it's going to be perfect. But it's extremely difficult. So like having Fortnite handle that.
Why is it difficult?
So picture like, I don't know, if you play Diablo 4 or something like that. Like with a mouse, you get to like get a position, right? It's like, oh, they're hovered, then they clicked this thing. What do we do? With a controller, there's no such thing. Well, you could do a virtual cursor. Most don't do that though. It's like, here's an array of like, here's a list on the left of like options. So if you hit down, right, it's going to go down, right? Okay, it's like, cool. Yeah. Well, what happens if when you hover this one, it opens up another UI over here? It's like, oh, I hit right to go over. But when you hit right and you're on the top one, it doesn't do that. So you start to have this like infinite tree of things that can happen.
Logic, right?
That's one way to do it. Or you have common UI, which lives above that or behind it or lower level than that. And it's going to look at the screen and it's like, they pushed right, and it's going to look from a low level. It's like, well, what's the element to the right of it? Is it the inventory screen? Is it the... So it's all very dynamic. Like picture like a dynamic website, like shuffling all these menus around. It's like you have to program that state into the controller. And then there's different types of controllers and whatnot. And then it's like, oh, cool. When the mouse comes out, then what happens to the UI? Because you were just controlling what happens. So I programmed all that stuff for CT2, and I was like, this is insane. That's why common UI. That's why they're writing common UI. So if you were to work in UEFN, you don't write that stuff. You don't know what the controller's doing. It just does it. Yeah. And it's like switching between third person to first person to editor mode with a mouse out, which is what Cinetracer can do. It's like, that's annoying. There's a lot of stuff you need to manage. It's like, oh, we have to hide all the mouse UIs and like we give focus to the right windows. And it's like, it's complicated, and that stuff doesn't make the game better. It's a mechanic. You have to do it right or else it doesn't work. Yeah. It's like, my mouse doesn't work. What's going on? But is it like, it's not like creative programming like I would like to be doing. So like UEFN and like a managed Fortnite, a managed UE6 is like, just write that framework for me. I just want to put the stuff in it and do the creative stuff, and it's more freeing. And that's sort of what Blueprints is as well. It's like I don't want to do the C++ engineering of like memory and like, you know, and writing an input system, writing my own movement, writing a movement component.
Yeah.
Is your life work?
You want to work on things that people do end up using. You want to work on things that people are going to notice rather than things that are just supposed to be there. And Fortnite, UEFN more specifically, takes care of a whole lot of things like that, which allows you to just be more creative and work on what you actually want to create. And I genuinely believe it's a blessing that we have something like UEFN. For anybody who's remotely interested in game dev, you fucking get to make a game without actually doing most of the hard work. You get to make a cinematic for your game with a sequencer. You get to do so many things. And then I saw, and I got so jealous, I think today or yesterday, Unreal Engine posted the spaceship that they showed at one of the conferences, and it's only going to be on Fab for Fortnite. I don't think it's available for outside of Fortnite, right?
I saw in a comment under that they were like, just wait, Fab will. I think they will release it for UE5. You could also just probably, could you migrate out of UEFN? I forget, but I saw a comment from first party that said that it's probably coming to UE5.
Okay, interesting. One thing I want to segue to, since we're talking about complex work and complex tasks like the UI, the UX, some of the things that you don't want to spend time on, but you just have to if you're not in UEFN, some of the blueprints that you have to work on. One tweet that we saw, or post, you may say now, because it's on X. I don't know if it was from you or if it was from somebody else in the community. I showed you this.
The blueprints?
Yes. So now you can take blueprints, post it on ChatGPT, and GPT will understand all of the logic. And then you can start asking it questions about the blueprints, and then tell GPT what kind of blueprints you want to, not blueprints, what kind of logic you want to add. And then it will tell you so that you can go ahead and, without having an extremely good amount of knowledge of blueprints, you can go ahead and create a really nice structure. That wasn't possible before. You know that, right? You have to go through thousands of pages of documentation, live streams that are 3 hours long, YouTube videos, if they exist. But now with AI, you can fucking do that. So what are your thoughts on AI, and have you used it yourself to help you with what you're building?
I saw something that for verse, which I'm learning like everyone else is, and the language changes every day or like every release, I feel like. And it's like,
and sorry, verse, for anybody that doesn't know, that's what the programming language of UEFN is at the moment, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I don't know that as well as blueprints. So I'm like, anything that can help, like I'll take it. AI for code, like there's a lot of different AI out there. So like AI for coding though, what I think would be useful is kind of how Versify is doing it, which is like the Verse AI system I've seen kind of being developed, is like, I would like to make this type of game with these features. And it's like, cool, here's the template code for that. It's sort of like how Unreal Engine has like templates and demo projects for the like third person blueprint or template, first person template, car racing template and whatnot. It's like that for coding. I can see that being useful, but like coding is like, from what I've heard mostly from people who are like, high level engineers, is it's like, yeah, it can give you something quickly, but then you have to comprehend what it did and figure out what it's doing wrong. So I think there's probably, it's sort of like, would you rather 3D model something from scratch or start from photogrammetry that you have to clean up, like a 3D scan?
Oh.
It's like, which is worse? And what will get you, because it's going to, it's like, so which way do you want to go about it? I personally cannot sculpt a photorealistic human from scratch. I would rather start from a scan, retopo it, and it's like, oh, okay, I got like the framework of it. Let's keep going. So I think there's certainly like code frameworks like that could be smart. And if you wanted to be like text input based, I'd rather just like a checkbox or something. I was like, I want this feature, I want this feature. It could be a chat. It could be a chat GPT input, but like an intelligent contextual like code framework generator, that's great. That would get me. I need that. I'm looking at it for UEFN. I'm like, I need to build like a tycoon, and I'm like, am I writing out like it could be like 5,000, 10,000 lines of verse. It's like, am I writing this or is there like some sort of template? So I think that could be helpful. As far as like templates and getting started, having it like actually write the game, I'm not so sure about that, but a smart template maker when it's code would be helpful. And it's like, it's, vetted by like, it's like, we know this framework like works. So I think for that case, it would be useful.
I'm excited for that because I personally, even though I did computer science, I don't remember a single thing about coding.
Fair.
And I know how useful it can be. And there's so many new models now. There's the Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which apparently does code really well compared to ChatGPT.
There's the Copilot agents as well that you can use.
So
I heard this. It's a lot of benefit when you actually have a code and you want to debug your code. So you can give it to ChatGPT or Claude, and they will go through it and they'll say, okay, you can fix it here. Or when you get error messages, you can drop the error message and it will tell you what
save
to
you
fix.
hours of debugging, which is, I'm sure, something you've encountered. But I think what you use as an analogy works perfectly. The photogrammetry versus something that was 3D modeled from scratch. For so many people, the photogrammetry model is perfect. You're just using it in the background of your scene and you don't want to fucking model a human. But for so many people, if that's the main subject, you're going to need to 3D model. So it really depends on your use case, and that's a perfect way to put it. But I'm just glad it exists because for so many people, it's going to open up so many doors. And I'm just excited about it. I think the best way to end this podcast is to end it with something me and Farhad have been super curious about, because when we watch your videos from before, you had this tiny green screen and you were just using one of your cameras to send everything to Unreal, and it wasn't even gen locked. Like, you were just testing things out. And then we go to today. We're not very updated as to what you've got. You probably have some new things, but you have the whole freaking Vicon system. You got a bunch of shit right now behind you.
Cameras behind you.
Yeah, you got so many cool gadgets. So we want to know, first of all, what is your most favorite gadget that you own?
In the basement.
Oh, the Vicon system. There's no question. It's like I always think it's like what you think mocap works like. It's like, oh, I stand in front of the whatever and I move and the 3D character moves just like that. That is this system. There is some work involved, but it's like, yes, that's like. And so when you start with like other systems, you're like, cool, I'm going to move and whatnot. Then you look at the character, like, what are you doing? Like, what's that? Like, that's not what I did. Optical mocap like this, like, it is that, with some parameters, but like, that's helpful. I'm that much closer to making the thing I want now.
We are so jealous.
What is the next gadget that you are eyeing on? What is the next thing you want to buy?
Talk about side projects that may not go anywhere. I want to.
A 1-year project. A sewing machine for clothes.
That's a good one.
I want an Apple Vision Pro. I'm not gonna lie. So
wait. Are we going back to the VTuber thing? Is Citizen Meta 1 coming back?
I see so many things. Are any of them good? So part of the reason Citizen Meta 1, the VTuber project, like wasn't as viable as it was like PC only. And VR. That's not a big user base for me. I know this for a fact. I know my numbers. It's not very good. My user base is probably, and I tweeted this the other day, when I say 50% Mac OS, it's probably more like 75% or something like that. So I'm like,
that's crazy.
For a UE5 dev, unheard of, like absolutely unheard of. I doubt most people even understand the beginning of what it takes to ship a Mac OS game or iOS. Really weird. There's a lot of steps that no PC developer will ever have heard of. So selling VR things to the film industry is tough. I have made VR things. There are VR users I've made stuff for. It's not a huge market. Apple making a VR headset, the film industry is very Apple. And if they're ever going to buy a VR headset, it certainly would be that one. It's going to
be the Vision Pro.
Because they're on iPhone. The number one request I get is to build for iOS, which I'm starting to kind of look at. It's still it's slower. Just get a MacBook Pro. So if I was to build like an XR AR app in the way that I do, if it's a tool, if it's an experience, it's probably gonna end up being a tool. That's what I end up building. Filmmakers will, and I think by the time like the Apple Vision Air 4 is out, that's what filmmakers will be using in my market analysis. So, this year's Unreal Fest has a talk specifically on Unreal Engine 5 for Apple Vision Pro and iOS and that whole ecosystem. It's not there yet. It's very early, but yeah, Apple Vision Air 3, it's gonna pop. It's popping off of the film industry, and I'd like to build stuff for it now. If I spent a year building it now, we're not shipping it. It's not making any money, and no one's gonna have it. But it's kind of like to get, because they're sort of redefining some of the open XR stuff. Like what they do is unique, and it's like, that's going to be the standard. And that is how the people I'm going for is like, that is probably what they're going to use. So yeah, it's a little hopium now, but like Apple Vision Pro in like 5 years or something like that is a pretty interesting space for me. Cause I haven't even used it yet, but I just know it's like, from what I've heard, people are like, it's like, they made the, it's like one of the hard parts about VR is like the UI, the UX is clunky.
Yes.
So if they smooth it out, it's like, well, they just made the iPhone and the iPad of VR, and it's like, okay, then with amazing XR and camera tracking, and like any of their systems right now can track your face and your full body, and yeah, it's maybe I'm making a VTuber app again or something, but like they have a lot of fun tech. So yeah, that's what I would want, but I'm not gonna spend a year on it just yet. But there will be a time where I'm gonna be deep in VR world again, but not yet.
I heard they're releasing a new version next year, the Vision Pro.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Like the hardware?
A cheaper
the
version,
Air.
which is not, do they call it Air?
No, people are just like speculating and like making mock-ups of it.
Because they're speculating for an Air iPhone as well, like thinner iPhone.
That's iPhone 17, not 6, not the one that will be released in September. Next year, they're going to be an Air version.
Okay. Have you tested the Vision Pro with Unreal at all? I know you don't have one yet, but have you ever seen anybody test it?
Yes. Yeah, I follow the couple people who are like actively doing it. It's still very new and buggy, kind of, but it's going to be, I have faith that it's going to be good. Is it a mainstream thing? Like, perhaps not, but like, I build for like a very specific segment. These are like the US and, worldwide filmmakers, but very much US. That's just where I live. It's the most like what I know. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's cool tech. I mean, it's gonna be pretty cool, and I think hopefully there's like some utility we can build around it, like the iPhone. Like if we take like the iPhone apps that every filmmaker uses on set, one of them is Artemis, and it's an XR overlay of like where's the sun gonna be at noon. It's a helpful thing to know for a shoot, and it's like, boom, it's right there. Take a photo. Every filmmaker in the world uses that. Right? It's
wow.
Like, I think there's similar opportunities there that the tech stack that they put together. It's like, yeah, you're natively, like, you put it on, it's like you're tracking everyone who's in the room. Everyone you see, you have a 3D skeleton of what they're doing. Just native. It's just built in. Do you want to use it? It's up to you. Like full, just like, I think that there's like some cool tools and utility that can come from that, specifically for filmmaking. And also I have a Vicon systems, like I want to put walking and talking metahumans in VR so bad. And I feel like that's a place I have a user base that I'm pretty sure, like if I release like the Apple Vision Pro, whatever, it's like, I know people will be like, I don't know what this dude made, but we were going for it, So I just want it to be there though, because no offense to Quest or anything like that, but putting it on like the Quest store or something like that, it's been like, or even Steam for VR. I'm like not that into it. I just make regular Steam games, but like an app store, like an Apple Vision App Store version of it is like, I could see that being compelling. So yeah. Yeah,
especially if it's like iPhone App Store at the beginning. The apps were making millions of dollars when they were
Doodle
released.
Jump.
Yeah. The beer. They were
the
simple,
beer, the lighter. Yeah.
So when Apple Vision Pro store started, people start building apps for it. There will be a huge market for it as well.
That's now too. I follow, because I got really into it at the launch. I got real hyped, really close to like
buying it,
and going down a hole is the big problem. Buying it, it's like, but like if I spent a year building for it, that's it's maybe not the time. I have to be very careful with that. But like, yeah, I follow a lot of the developers that make the like, you pick up a thing and you look at it, and it's like, or like I think the big one's like a rocket app that you can like put it on, you can like see different rockets at scale and stuff like that. It's like, oh shit, and like the echo shade, like the body parts that come up, it's like. In the early days of those, that's all you can get, and they could be like $60 apps. It's like, hey, you spend $4,000 on this thing, and it's like, oh yeah, I'll buy the $60 app, and we'll just try it. It's like, okay, cool, you used it once, and like that's the user base in the beginning. They're like, they use like an app for $60 like once, and it's like, cool, they're happy. That's all they want. Yeah. So that ecosystem exists now, but it's not. I'm not building into it yet.
I'm just curious, what's the demographic at the moment? Because when the Vision Pro was released,
Americans.
Yeah, but when it was first released, the hype was extremely high. of course, with VR, that's usually the case. You got the Quest coming out, and then the hype is there. But Vision Pro, because it was an Apple product, the hype was really high. I wonder how many people actually use it today in terms of numbers. I do not have the statistics. I'm very curious to see how it's growing.
Well, it's US only, right? They only just opened it up to other countries like recently, so it launched US only. So that's certainly smaller. I don't know. I don't know. But I think for the people that are like XR people, you know, had like HoloLenses, they had like Magic Leaps. It's you know, it's a good step towards like mainstream adoption, you know, and having that like the fact you can go to Apple Store and try on like an XR headset, like pretty much. Well, eventually it'll be worldwide, but like almost like anywhere in the US is like. That's a big deal for people who've like spent their lives working in XR. It's like validating that like Apple's like, yes, we're going to build an ecosystem for this. There's utility. There is utility in it. Like for film, like if it's just Artemis and like the XR overlay for like, you know, the sun, where the sun's going to be, it's like there is utility that'll come from it. And the room scanning stuff is really good. I used to be so into scanning before I was doing Vicon stuff. I was working with Leica and like scanning rooms and doing photogrammetry and stuff like that. And like the iPhone just does an incredible room scanner now. Yeah. Like people take it for granted. It's like, you want to scan your room, have a perfect model? It's like, yeah, of course. Like what's the big deal? But that's only because they built this tech stack for it. You know, it's like, so I hope that there's also like things that we can't even conceive yet of like, once you have all this tech in here and it's like smooth, it's like, it's new. There's cool stuff. I hope it's cool. Hopefully UE5 works on it really well.
Well, whatever happens, we hope that from the lessons you've already learned, you don't go down a path for 1 year and then realize it's.
But you still release the app.
Even time. But even if you didn't release it, there's stuff you learned. So you never know what to do until you actually
Apple Vision
do it.
Pro.
Yeah, we're just gonna be watching, supporting, and we are rooting for you because you're always sharing the knowledge, and I think that's the most important part. Going back to the very beginning of this podcast, we really consider you as one of the most valuable members of the community because of the fact that you inspire others, and it's not easy to do that. I just want people to know that when we create whatever we create in Unreal, when you create whatever you create in Unreal, it's much easier to just go and sleep afterwards. But we all decide to go ahead and make videos about it. And these videos are not one-take videos. They take multiple takes. They probably take a little bit of scripting, editing's involved. But we do it because we love sharing the knowledge. And you have done that. You've inspired us. And we really appreciate that. So thank you so much, one, for sharing the knowledge and inspiring us. And two, for giving us your time and helping us learn a little bit more about your past and about why you do what you do. And also the two failures. There were so many lessons that came from that. So thank you for sharing those as well.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I love the stuff you're producing. And hopefully we do this again.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you so much. And for everybody watching and listening, thank you as well. We will see you guys on the next episode. Until then, ciao.